Good afternoon, and thank you again for joining us today. I'm going to move through things pretty quickly given the limited time, so if there's something that you are concerned with that doesn't get addressed in the presentation, there will be a question and discussion period at the end. In addition, the presentation will be posted following the workshop. So jumping in, the Arizona State Museum is the administrator for the Arizona Revised Statute sections 41-844 and 41-865. These statutes provide for the respectful treatment and disposition of human remains 50 years or older, funerary objects, and other protected classes of cultural objects. Burial discovery agreements, or BDAs, are not a requirement under the statutes, but rather are provided for in the ABOR rules implementing the statutes as a means to facilitate compliance. At their core, BDAs are a helpful instrument for clarifying and streamlining the processes following a disturbance of human remains, helping to alleviate stress and potential delays. Most importantly, however, BDAs help to ensure that ancestral remains are treated with respect and dignity at all times, and that appropriate cultural practices are followed when interacting with these individuals. Because the appropriate procedures are laid out ahead of time with BDAs, a proactive rather than reactive response is afforded in our care of ancestral remains who have been disturbed from their resting place. For these reasons, ASM encourages that a burial agreement be in place for any project that will impact a known archaeological site or whenever there is a reasonable expectation of encountering remains or protected categories of objects. There are three types of burial discovery agreements available through the ASM Repatriation Office. These are standard, general, and project-specific agreements. I will discuss these in order of most to least common. So the most common type of agreement is the standard agreement, and these are for projects that are on state or private land within the designated tribal management areas illustrated at the left. These include Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian Community, Gila River Indian Community, and the Tohono O'odham Nation. General BDAs are the second most common type of burial agreement offered by ASM. These agreements cover projects that are on lands owned or controlled by a municipality, or for projects that are initiated by a municipality on state or private land. ASM has three active general BDAs on file for the City of Phoenix, the City of Tempe, and Pima County. In addition, there are two general BDAs on file for two historic cemeteries, but those are much less common. Two key points to remember about general BDAs is that they are always issued by ASM, not the municipality. So the same application process and issuance process will still pertain to general BDAs. The second thing to remember is that general BDAs are only issued with the consent of the appropriate municipality. And the reason for this is that the municipality is taking on the responsibility of managing and reporting for the burial agreement. As an example of permission, I have on this slide here the City of Phoenix Burial Agreement Request Form that is submitted by people wishing to use the City of Phoenix General Agreement. And so this form, when it's submitted, it indicates that Lorraine Montero has provided consent for use of that burial agreement. If you happen to be working for a municipality that does not use a permission sheet like this, then that's still okay, but you will still need to submit an email or letter documenting your permission. The third and least common type of BDA is the project-specific agreement. These are issued for projects that fall outside of the areas previously discussed. And since most development projects in Arizona occur in the Phoenix and Tucson regions, a project-specific agreement is often not the best fit. It is good to know, though, that occasionally a project-specific agreement will be issued for areas that are traditionally covered by standard or general agreements if there is concern that needs to be outlined in greater detail within the agreement. Things to note about the project-specific agreements are that they are negotiated on a case-by-case basis, and they involve all tribes or groups who have indicated affinity with the area impacted by the project. Because of this, they take a lot longer to issue, and it's typically a 6 to 8 week turnaround. With that overview of the types of burial discovery agreements available, I would like to remind you that there are no fees associated with obtaining a BDA. The only fees associated with obtaining an agreement are if your project is on state land and has encountered ancestral remains. In that event, then there will be a fee associated with the review of the final report of remains that must be submitted for curation. In addition, there will be fees associated if you opt for an expedited service, such as a quicker turnaround for your burial discovery agreement. So now that we have covered the general information pertaining to BDAs, I would like to focus on the revisions made last year to standard BDAs in the BRIC and SRPMIC management areas. These revisions are significant not only in the procedural clarification they provide, but also in their approach to ensuring the respectful treatment of ancestral remains and their belongings, including the way we discuss and interact with the remains in our temporary care. The revised agreement is a much longer document that consists of essentially 5 parts. The first part being cultivating culturally respectful behavior, then the procedures and project information forms, which you guys are already familiar with. There's an instructions for the respectful treatment and repatriation of human remains and funerary objects section, and instructions for respectful treatment and repatriation of sacred ceremonial objects and objects of national or tribal patrimony. And finally, there will be a project information spreadsheet that will be sent out using Excel at the time that your burial agreement is disseminated. Other key things to know about these revisions are that the procedures for the security of remains have been updated to clarify what needs to happen and the appropriate actions to take. In addition, there are updated contacts and contact preferences for all parties listed on the agreement. So please take note specifically of this information because these are things that are oftentimes just glossed over on the assumption that people and contacts remain the same. So moving on to the application process, this is something that I'm not going to spend a lot of time on because there's already a lot of detailed information available on the ASM webpage. I do want to take this opportunity, however, to highlight the location in the specific document where you can find this information, just in case you aren't familiar with that. So this link here will take you to the ASM CRM webpage, and under Forms and Documents, then Guidance Documents, you will find this document, which is the Submission Procedures and Checklist for Cultural Resources Management Services. So starting on page 31 is the application process for BDAs. So if you open that document and look there, it goes step by step, the instructions that need to be followed by burial agreement type. Something to note is that if you have a project that's not being conducted under an Arizona Antiquities Act permit or that is located solely on private land, that will require an ASM accession number to be requested as well. And so all of the forms that you will need to fill out, including the ASM accession number request form, are available on the ASM CRM web link right here. Following approval of your burial agreement application, the Repatriation Office will issue an agreement and a case number for the project. Upon receipt of the agreement, the project director will need to read through the document and closely follow the procedures contained within. The project director should also ensure that all field crew be familiar with those portions of the agreement that outline appropriate behavior and actions surrounding disturbances of remains. Some of the procedures that the project director or person managing the BDA can expect to be completed over the course of a BDA are transmitting a copy of the signed agreement to all parties, notifying all parties of disturbances of remains, and notifying all parties of project initiation and completion. And so this point is something that I want to take special note of, in that It oftentimes is omitted, but as a part of an agreement, at no point should ground disturbing work be conducted under that agreement without notification to the tribes and to ASM. Tribes must be afforded an opportunity to visit the field site prior to any work being done if they so desire. Another thing to keep in mind is that when completing these procedures, it is very helpful if you can also include the burial discovery agreement case number that was assigned to you on all correspondence pertaining to the agreement, because this is the fastest and easiest way for us to document what's happening with that specific project. In addition, I also want to stress that if no response is received with email transmissions to the claimant tribes, please contact them by phone to ensure that they received the materials. In the event that remains subject to the repatriation statutes are disturbed over the course of a project, the archaeological contractor is authorized to undertake limited additional excavation to determine if the materials uncovered are in fact a protected class of remains prior to notification. As soon as those remains are determined to be a protected class of remains, then those remains must be secured and protected according to the burial discovery agreement. In addition, the contractor must notify claimant tribes and the ASM repatriation office of any and all disturbances within 24 hours. And please note that all parties should always be notified via email, and that there are different preferences for contact for different groups. SRP, MIC, and GRIC wish to be notified by phone and email, and the Hopi tribe wishes to be notified by email and mail. In order to help eliminate the stress and confusion surrounding notification procedures for human remains, we recently created a notification of disturbance of remains form to assist in the process. So this form basically standardizes the reporting and ensures that all required information is provided. It also offers additional information that will be useful to tribes when visiting the field site. When a project has concluded, the final reporting requirements listed in the agreement must be fulfilled before the agreement can be closed in the repatriation office. For projects where remains were disturbed, these final reporting documents consist of 3 parts: a report of remains, transfer documentation, and a final report if the project was conducted under an Arizona Antiquities Act permit. For the report of remains, this includes a formal discussion of mortuary features, the human remains that were located within those features, and all associated funerary objects. Things that you will also need to include are how you were able to determine cultural identification for the remains located, and the names of excavators and dates of excavation. Please also be respectful of the situation when you are completing this discussion, and do not report on human remains or mortuary features as though they are research subjects. For the transfer documentation, this is going to include a detailed inventory of the remains and funerary objects that are being repatriated, the names and affiliations of all participating parties, the signatures and transfer of those who are participating in the repatriation, and the date of repatriation. For projects where no remains were encountered, a simple communication of no remains is required. And in addition to that, if your project was operating under a AAA permit, then a final report will need to be submitted for review. And for all projects, regardless of what was encountered or permitting status, a project submission update form will need to be submitted. So this form triggers the generation of the final invoice or invoice 2 as applicable, and it also signals to us the closure of a project. Another thing that will need to be submitted by January 31st of each year is the Arizona Antiquities Act Project Specific Permit and Burial Discovery Agreement End of Year Summary Report Form. So this document will need to be submitted to the ASM Repatriation Office and to GRIC and SRP MIC as applicable every year until the project has concluded and all reporting requirements have been fulfilled. So that is all that I have pertaining to the BDA process for you. But before turning it over to questions, I want to stress the following 2 points again. The ASM Repatriation Office has a number of guidance documents available on the web page. Please use the resources available, but if you do have questions or concerns, or you're confused about how something is worded or you can't find something, then please get in touch with us. We are happy to help you, and we are here to be a resource for you. The second thing is that we encourage you to use burial discovery agreements. They save time for project managers, for the tribes, and for the repatriation office, and they help to ensure that the standards of respect and dignity are maintained at all times in these sensitive situations. And with no cost for an agreement, there is really not a reason to pursue one. So with that, I will turn it over to questions. Thank you again for coming.